They say every hotel has its secrets, but some secrets never die. Picture this, a forgotten hotel standing on the edge of a dying town, its windows clouded with decades of dust, its walls echoing with silence. Once a place of luxury, where travelers sipped champagne in velvet lounges and laughed in candlelit ballrooms. Now, only the shadows remain. Locals whisper about the place, calling it cursed, a building where the lights flicker on, though no one lives there, and where voices echo down empty hallways long after midnight. Our story begins with Emily and Daniel, a young couple searching for a cheap stop on their road trip. They weren't looking for adventure, or horror, or ghosts. They were just tired, desperate for a bed, and lured by the faded neon sign that still buzzed faintly in the night. The Silver Pines Hotel, vacancy. Inside, the air was colder than the autumn evening outside. The lobby smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic, like rust or blood. Behind the desk stood an old man with pale eyes that seemed to look straight through them. He greeted them with a smile that didn't quite reach his face. His voice was soft, raspy, and each word seemed dragged out, as though he hadn't spoken in years. Emily shivered. Daniel joked to lighten the mood. "Guess this place hasn't seen customers in decades." The old man didn't laugh. Instead, he slid a heavy brass key across the counter. "Room 6, he said. End of the hall." Upstairs, the long hallway stretched forever, lined with doors that looked identical but carried a strange presence. Emily swore she saw shadows moving beneath one of the doors, yet there was no sound, no television, no voices, no signs of life. Room 6 creaked open with effort, revealing faded wallpaper peeling like skin, a cracked mirror, and a bed that looked older than the couple themselves. Daniel flopped onto the mattress with a laugh. Emily sat quietly by the window, staring into the parking lot below, where she noticed something chilling. There were cars out there, at least 4 of them, dusty, faded, some with weeds growing up through the tires, abandoned, yet their headlights seemed faintly glimmering. In the moonlight, like eyes watching, her stomach tightened. If no one was staying here, whose cars were those? Later that night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, Emily heard it, the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway, slow, dragging, deliberate. She pressed her ear to the door. The steps stopped directly outside their room. She held her breath. Silence. And then 3 sharp knocks. She froze. Daniel stirred, muttering in his sleep. Emily whispered, "Who's there?" But there was no reply. Only the faint creak of floorboards as something or someone moved away. She should have been relieved, but the strangest part, the sound didn't go toward the stairs. It went deeper into the hallway, toward the end, where the light flickered and died. And as Emily crawled back into bed, heart racing, she glanced at the cracked mirror across the room and swore she saw someone standing behind her reflection just for an instant. What would you do if the place you thought was just an old, empty hotel began showing signs that you were not alone? Because for Emily and Daniel, this was only the beginning. The Silver Pines Hotel had guests that never checked out, and tonight they were wide awake. But what exactly was waiting for them behind those locked doors? The night dragged on inside room 6, but for Emily, sleep never came. The sound of those footsteps still lingered in her ears, the echo of the 3 knocks pounding inside her chest. Daniel, half asleep and stubbornly rational, dismissed it as probably the wind or pipes creaking, but deep down, Emily knew what she had heard. Footsteps. Morning light did little to calm her nerves. When they walked down to the lobby for breakfast, the desk clerk, the pale-eyed old man, was gone. The counter was unattended, dust gathering in the sunlight as if no one had touched it for years. Yet on the counter sat a guest book, its pages yellowed and brittle. Curious, Daniel flipped it open. The entries began in the 1960s. Neat handwriting, cheerful notes about honeymoons, vacations, business trips. But the later entries grew stranger. Pages filled with jagged handwriting, desperate messages. "Don't stay in room 6. Voices in the walls. They're watching. Help." The last entry was dated nearly 30 years ago. Emily snapped the book shut, her hands trembling. She whispered, "Daniel, no one's been here in decades." Yet just then, the old man appeared silently behind the desk, his voice rasping. "How was your night?" Daniel stammered out a polite response, but Emily stared at him, her throat dry. Where had he come from, and why hadn't they heard him approach? They left the lobby quickly, deciding to explore the town instead. But outside, the air was thick, unnaturally still. The main road was lined with boarded-up shops, broken signs swaying in the wind. It was like stepping into a ghost town. And the strangest thing, when Emily looked back at the hotel, she saw a curtain on the 2nd floor move, as if someone was watching them. That night, when they returned, the unease deepened. The hallway felt darker, longer. The The light bulbs overhead buzzed and flickered, and as they reached room 6, Emily noticed something chilling. One of the other doors, which had been locked shut the day before, was now open just a crack. Inside, the darkness seemed alive. She caught the faintest sound, breathing. Emily pulled Daniel back, but he brushed it off. It's probably another guest. Yet they hadn't seen a single living soul in the hotel besides the old man. Later, as they tried to sleep, the noises began again. This time, it wasn't just footsteps. It was whispers. Low, urgent whispers seeping through the walls, so faint she couldn't make out the words. They seemed to come from everywhere, above the ceiling, beneath the floor, even from inside the mirror. Emily shook Daniel awake. "Do you hear it?" He listened. The whispers stopped instantly, as if the voices knew. His face paled. "Maybe it's the pipes," he said again, but his voice was hollow now, unconvincing. At midnight, the knocking returned, not just at their door this time, but echoing through the hallway, one door after another. Knock, knock, knock. The sound moved from one end to the other, deliberate, methodical, like something was going room to room, checking. Then it stopped. Silence pressed in. Emily's heart hammered. She whispered, What if those cars outside still belong to people who checked in?" Daniel frowned. "Checked in when?" Emily swallowed hard. "And never checked out." Her words hung in the darkness like a curse. And as they sat in silence, staring at the cracked mirror across the room, the glass rippled faintly, like water disturbed by something just beneath the surface. What would you do if the very walls of your room seemed alive with voices of the dead? Because the Silver Pines Hotel was no ordinary stopover, and the deeper Emily and Daniel stayed, the more it became clear. They weren't just guests here. They were being chosen. But chosen for what? By the third night, the Silver Pines no longer felt like a hotel at all. It felt like a trap. Every step in its long corridors echoed too long, as if the building itself was listening. The whispers grew louder, clearer, and more insistent. Emily swore she heard her own name drifting through the vents, hissed in a dozen different voices. "Emily, Emily!" Daniel tried to keep calm, but even his jokes had faded. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way she jumped at every creak of the floorboards. And though he wouldn't admit it, he had started seeing things too. Shadows where no shadows should be. Shapes flitting across mirrors, faces lingering just outside the corner of his vision. That evening, they made a decision. They would leave, first thing in the morning. But as Emily began packing, she noticed something that froze her blood. Her suitcase, the one she had zipped shut, was already open. Her clothes were neatly folded, rearranged, as though someone, or something, had been inside while they slept. Daniel dismissed it at first, but then his own belongings caught his eye. His watch, his wallet, his keys, all placed perfectly in a line on the dresser. Neither of them had done it. And then came the discovery that made them question everything. The guest book. It wasn't on the lobby counter anymore. It was sitting inside their room, wide open. The last page had changed. New words were scrawled in shaky handwriting. Room 6. Emily and Daniel arrived yesterday. Leaving. Never. Daniel's face drained of color. Someone's messing with us. But Emily whispered, trembling, or maybe it isn't someone. That night, sleep was impossible. The knocks returned. This time, not at the doors, but inside the walls. Hollow thuds, like fists pounding to be let out. The whispers grew into screams, muffled and desperate. Emily covered her ears, tears streaming down her face. "They're trapped. Daniel, they're trapped in here." At 3 a.m., the lights went out. The hallway outside their room glowed faintly in the dark, lit not by electricity, but by something else, something cold and unnatural. And that was when they heard it. Not just whispers now, voices, entire conversations happening outside their door. Dozens of voices, laughing, crying, arguing. Guests. Daniel crept to the peephole, his breath caught in his throat. The hallway was full. Men in old-fashioned suits, women in 1960s dresses, children clutching dolls with missing eyes. Guests from every decade since the hotel had opened. But their faces were pale, hollow, rotting, their eyes glowing faintly white. And then, as if sensing his gaze, every single one of them turned to face room 6. Daniel stumbled back, his skin crawling. Emily gripped his hand. "What did you see?" He couldn't answer. He just shook his head, but his eyes said it all. The voices grew louder, pressing against the door, rattling the knob. Then, silence. Utter, suffocating silence. Emily whispered, "Where did they go?" The answer came in the cracked mirror. Their reflections weren't alone anymore. Behind them stood the same pale-eyed guests, crowding closer and closer, their mouths opening wide as if screaming silently. Emily screamed and covered the mirror with a blanket, but the damage was done. The couple knew now. The hotel wasn't haunted by one ghost. It was full, every room occupied, every soul still here. And room 6? It was just their turn. What would you do if the dead checked in beside you, and all of them wanted company? Because for Emily and Daniel, escape was no longer just about leaving the hotel. It was about surviving the night. But what happens when the hotel decides it won't let them leave? By the 4th night, Emily and Daniel weren't just afraid. They were desperate, sleep-deprived, nerves shredded. Every creak in the walls sounded like a death sentence. They clung to each other, whispering the same words over and over. Tomorrow, we leave tomorrow. But the hotel had other plans. At midnight, the entire building seemed to awaken. The floorboards groaned as though hundreds of footsteps pressed down at once. The wallpaper peeled and shifted, revealing shapes beneath, faces screaming silently from inside the walls. Doors up and down the hallway banged open and shut in unison, slamming with inhuman force. And then came the laughter. Dozens of voices cackling, whispering, weeping, all blending into a chorus that rattled the air. Emily clutched her head, screaming, "Make it stop!" But Daniel grabbed her hand. "We're getting out, now." They bolted into the hallway. Every door was open now, revealing rooms filled with horrors, frozen in time. A dining table where skeletal figures still sat with rotting plates of food. A ballroom where ghostly couples spun in endless circles. A nursery where toys moved on their own. Rocking chairs creaking without children to fill them. The hall stretched endlessly, each step heavier than the last, as though the carpet itself was trying to drag them down. And then, from the far end, the pale-eyed guests appeared. They filled the corridor. Men, women, children, all in tattered clothing from decades past. Their movements were stiff, unnatural, as though their bones had long since broken, but something forced them to walk anyway. Emily and Daniel stumbled backward, but the guests advanced, whispering in perfect unison, "Stay with us, forever." Daniel pulled Emily toward the stairs, but when they reached the lobby, their hope collapsed. The front doors, massive glass doors that had once welcomed travelers, were now bricked over from the inside, as though the hotel had sealed itself shut. Daniel pounded against the wall, blood smearing on the bricks, screaming, "Let us out!" Behind them, the clerk appeared, the old man with pale eyes, his smile now stretched too wide, too sharp. "No one leaves," he rasped. "The Silver Pines needs its guests, and it has chosen you," Emily screamed, dragging Daniel up another flight of stairs. They darted into random hallways, twisting, turning, but the layout made no sense. Doors led into endless corridors. Staircases looped back into the same floor. The hotel was shifting, reshaping itself, trapping them like rats in a maze. And then the voices returned, closer, louder. "Room 6, room 6, return to room 6. Emily stopped, shaking her head violently. "No, we're not going back there." But when she looked around, every single door in the hallway bore the same number, 6. Hundreds of doors, hundreds of room 6s. The couple stumbled into one, desperate for escape. Inside, the room was identical to theirs. Same cracked mirror, same peeling wallpaper, same suffocating cold. But this time, the mirror rippled violently, and from its surface, pale hands began clawing through. Dozens of them. Emily shrieked as a skeletal figure dragged itself out, its mouth stretched open in an endless scream. Daniel swung a lamp at it, shattering the mirror into shards, but every shard reflected another pale-eyed guest, all reaching, all grinning. The walls bled, the ceiling groaned, and from the hallway came the sound of synchronized footsteps, hundreds of them marching closer, closer, closer. Emily collapsed against the wall, sobbing. "Daniel, we're not going to get out, are we?" His face was pale, his voice broken. I don't know." The lights flickered violently, plunging them into complete darkness. And in that darkness, the whispers became one deafening chant. "You belong to us. You belong to the hotel." The door burst open. The pale-eyed guests flooded in, their rotting hands outstretched, reaching for Emily and Daniel. What would you do if an entire building came alive, and every ghost within it demanded you as their next sacrifice? Because in that moment, the couple realized the truth. The Silver Pines Hotel didn't just keep its guests, it consumed them. But how does a place like this decide who stays and who becomes part of its walls forever? The pale-eyed guests closed in, their footsteps thundered against the floor, their whispers now a deafening roar. Emily and Daniel fought desperately, clawing at the walls, searching for any exit, any escape, but the hotel was alive, and it wanted them. The floor buckled beneath their feet, splitting open like a wound. From the cracks, black smoke poured out, carrying with it the smell of rot and burning flesh. Daniel dragged Emily toward the door, but when they stepped into the hallway, it was no longer a hallway at all. It was the lobby, the same peeling wallpaper, the same front desk, the same guest book waiting on the counter. But this time, the old clerk wasn't behind it. Instead, Emily saw themselves, two figures standing there, pale-eyed, frozen smiles plastered on their faces. She stumbled backward in horror. "Daniel, that's us." And it was. Their reflections, standing like mannequins, already part of the hotel. The guests circled them now, whispering, reaching, ushering them forward. Emily screamed, fighting against invisible hands dragging her toward the counter. Daniel tried to pull her back, but his strength was failing, his body growing heavy, numb. He looked at his hands. They were fading, becoming translucent. The clerk's voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Every hotel needs its staff. Every guest must take their turn," Emily thrashed, sobbing. "No, we're not staying here." But the guest book on the counter flipped open, its pages rustling until it stopped on the last entry. The words appeared, one by one, written in invisible ink that bled across the paper. Emily and Daniel, checked in, tonight, checked out, never. The pale-eyed guests pressed closer, their cold hands brushing against skin, pulling them in, binding them to the silver pines forever. And then, silence. The hotel was quiet once again. The guests vanished back into their rooms. The hall stood, empty. The mirrors cracked, but still, the walls holding their secrets. The next morning, the neon sign outside flickered faintly to life. Vacancy. A car pulled into the lot. A new couple, tired from the road, desperate for a bed. They stepped inside. The lobby was the same as always, but now, behind the desk, Emily and Daniel stood, eyes pale, smiles too wide, welcoming the next guests into their eternal prison. The Silver Pines Hotel had claimed 2 more souls, and its hunger was endless. So tell me, if you were on a lonely road and you saw that glowing sign promising a warm bed for the night, would you dare to step inside? Because at the Silver Pines Hotel, no one ever truly checks out. That concludes our horror tale. If you enjoyed Haunted Hotel Horror Story, The Guests Who Never Checked Out, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Shadow Tales, your home for nightmares that never end. Now tell me, would you survive a night in this hotel?